Daniel stood at the edge of the mountain overlook, watching the sun rise over the misty valleys below. 5 years ago, he never imagined he'd be here, living in a small wooden cabin in the remote village of Pine Ridge, population 347. Back then, he was climbing the corporate ladder in the city, convinced that success meant a bigger house, a newer car, and a fuller closet. The transformation began on a particularly dark day. Daniel had just received his annual bonus $25,000, yet instead of joy, he felt emptiness. He was $80,000 in debt. His marriage with Elena was crumbling under financial stress, and despite earning $120,000 annually, they had nothing saved. The city apartment cost $3,000 monthly. Car payments took another $800, and lifestyle expenses consumed the rest. "We can't keep living like this," Elena said one evening, tears in her eyes. "We're working ourselves to death and have nothing to show for it." That night, they made a radical decision. Daniel's late grandfather had left him a small piece of land in Pine Ridge, nestled in the mountains 3 hours from the city. They would move there, build a simple life, and escape the financial trap that was suffocating them. Their city friends thought they were crazy. Richard, Daniel's wealthy cousin, laughed outright. "You're throwing away your career. What will you do in the middle of nowhere? Live like peasants?" But Daniel and Elena were determined. They sold their apartment, downsized to essentials, and moved to the mountains. Their new home was a modest cabin, 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, and a breathtaking view. The first months were challenging. Daniel worked remotely as a freelance consultant, earning less than before, but enough. Elena started a small organic garden. They learned to chop wood, preserve food, and live with the rhythms of nature. The mountain community welcomed them, though some were skeptical of city folk. One morning, while struggling to fix their water pump, Danielle met Yusuf, a 73-year-old farmer who'd lived in Pine Ridge his entire life. Joseph wore patched overalls and drove a 30-year-old truck, yet he owned 50 acres of land debt-free and had more savings than Daniel ever had in the city. "Need help, son?" Joseph offered, his weathered hands expertly fixing the pump in minutes. Over the following months, Joseph became Daniel's unexpected mentor. While working side by side fixing fences, tending gardens, or splitting firewood, Joseph shared wisdom that no business school ever taught. City folks confuse earning with wealth. Joseph said one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow, "I never made more than $35,000 a year, but I saved half of it, lived simply, bought only what I needed, grew what I could. Now I'm 73, debt-free, with money in the bank and peace in my heart. That's wealth." Daniel began to understand. In the city, he earned more, but spent everything trying to look successful. Here, he earned less, but kept most of it, without the pressure to impress neighbors, without expensive restaurants and designer clothes. Their savings grew steadily. Elena's garden flourished. They grew tomatoes, beans, squash, and herbs. What they couldn't grow, they bartered with neighbors: fresh eggs for homemade bread, vegetables for honey. The community operated on cooperation, not competition. 1 year after moving, Daniel and Elena had saved $30,000 more than they'd saved in 8 years of city living. They were debt-free. Their monthly expenses were minimal: $400 for utilities, $300 for property taxes, $500 for food and necessities. Daniel's freelance work brought in $4,000 monthly, and Elena started selling organic produce at the local farmers market, adding another $800. 2 years later, Richard visited. He arrived in his luxury SUV, wearing expensive clothes, but looking exhausted and stressed. Over dinner, he complained about his new mortgage, credit card debt, and the pressure to maintain his lifestyle despite a recent promotion. "But Daniel," Richard said, looking around the simple cabin, "don't you miss the city? The restaurants? The entertainment? The excitement?" Daniel smiled, glancing at Elena, who was reading contentedly by the fire. "Richard, I don't miss the stress. I don't miss working 70 hours a week to pay for things I didn't need. Here, I work 30 hours a week, earn less, but sabi more. Elena and I actually see each other. We're healthy. We're happy, and we're building real wealth." Richard looked confused. "But you're living so Simply, exactly, Daniel replied. That's the point. Simple living doesn't mean poor living. It means intentional living. Every dollar we don't spend on impressing others is a dollar working for our future. Daniel learned to find richness in simplicity. Morning coffee on the porch, watching deer graze, evening walks through pine forests, conversations with neighbors who became true friends, the satisfaction of growing their own food, the peace of owning their home outright. Joseph visited often, becoming like family. One evening, he shared his philosophy. True wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you don't need. A man who needs little is richer than a king who's never satisfied. 3 years after moving to Pine Ridge, Daniel and Elena had invested $80,000 in index funds, had a fully funded emergency fund, and were living their richest life not because they had more things, but because they had more freedom. Daniel started a blog sharing their journey and was surprised by the response. Thousands of people, trapped in the same cycle he'd escaped, reached out. Many visited Pine Ridge, inspired by the possibility of a different life. The mountain village taught Daniel that wealth isn't about your income, it is about the gap between what you earn and what you spend. It's about needing less, appreciating more, and investing in what truly matters. Relationships, health, peace of mind, and financial security. Standing on that mountain overlook each morning, Daniel realized he was wealthier than he'd ever been in the city. His pockets were full not because he earned millions, but because he spent mindfully. His heart was full because he lived intentionally. His future was secure because he'd discovered the timeless truth. Simple living leads to full pockets, and full pockets lead to true freedom. The key to true wealth, Daniel learned, wasn't found in skyscrapers or boardrooms. It was here, in the mountains, where simple living created space for what really mattered and where that space filled his pockets and his life with more richness than money alone could ever buy.